Stella's hanging on the couch tonight. Alyssa's not home, so we're probably going to get plenty of dog action. This is exciting.
We're the second favorites around here, so when she's not home.
I get it, man.
Yep.
We're king of the castle. Isn't that right, Stelly?
Episode 4. 4, right? Because I got it wrong last time.
Yeah, this is episode 4. And the first thing will be king of the castle. Starting strong.
I'm not mad about that.
Big Borat fan, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, if you can get Borat reference in, then you got me.
Oh, that's Ryan's kryptonite. I had no idea.
We've been looking for years for that. What
Ryan's like, you'll never get this. It really is.
How many times have you seen that movie, Ryan?
Honestly, I haven't seen it all that much, but I had a friend growing up who used the references numerous times a day.
Yeah.
And so they just kill me every time now.
There you go. That's funny.
He had the voice down, the impression down.
100%.
Sounds like nice.
Killed it on the voice.
That's funny. All right, Kev, where we at? You almost...
I gotta tag you guys.
Okay. That's a big... I get it. No, hey, we gotta...
I feel like that legitimately this is somewhat of like a look into like what I do is got to keep up with social media.
Well, I think that's kind of what's been cool about the podcast in general, though, is like, I don't know, I felt like it's been very true to us. Like, this is what it, I mean, I don't know how many people are super interested in just having a conversation with us, but this is what it's like. This is what Ryan deals with on a daily basis.
Yep. Constantly just keeping up on, I actually have a, on my to-do list, post on my story once a day because I used to not almost ever just because it wasn't a habit. Yeah. But I started putting that in the morning and then I would just kind of go through my day. I was like, all right, what are we doing interesting today? Or just at least something unique. And 50% of the time it's just the dogs because I'm not doing anything interesting. But it's helped me kind of get in the habit of it. It's still on there because I think I would forget if I didn't have it.
Well, that's an interesting thing because I think I think we've seen companies turn to doing things like that. Like I know of companies that have like weekly requirements of their employees to make social media posts. I know, I mean, S2 does it. I know or at least they used to. I don't know if they still do. I would imagine that they do. I think it's probably a little different than it was, but I remember they were you had to make story posts and do stuff like that working there. So it's really interesting. I think it just shows how much social media, how important it is where like companies are even implementing it into their like weekly requirements for their employees to kind of do things.
Huge tool.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely can be.
And having more than just like the business post is important. Because like I know like myself, I think I had one Instagram post before we opened up Triad, and I went probably 2 years before I started actually making posts on my own page. I'm just not naturally a poster. Yeah. So.
I think it's an interesting thing because I think that like I understand why they do it, and I think done correctly, I think it's a really solid thing. But I'm also curious of like when you're, I don't know, I'm trying to imagine the people that work at Triad, but like if they were forced to, like, I'm not saying that S2s do anything wrong, but like if it was a requirement at like some point, I do feel like part of social media is like authenticity to some extent, maybe.
For sure.
And I feel like maybe putting a requirement on it might eventually water it down. Like I'm just trying to think like if I had like I'm just making up what a requirement for any X company might be. But if it was like, if I had to post twice a week and a story post or something like that, I would run out of things so quickly. I'd be posting dogs and
no, I know I've made posts. Like it takes quite a bit of effort just to come up with something unique and creative. And I try and post 3 times a week. And again, that's kind of a requirement that I set for myself. Sure. But I know that I run into the points in time where I will spend half a day trying to come up with some kind of like idea and content to post. And then I end up putting something out that I'm like, this is just kind of filler. But it's kind of like going to the gym. It's like, man, I'd rather at least get it done. Today's not going to be the best, but I'm going to keep in the habit. I don't want to lose the habit. But that requirement does produce some less than good quality.
Well, and I might just be applying it to myself too, because my social media is very not serious in any way. Like I don't.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I don't view or use my social media in very, very often in like a very serious manner. It's mostly just joking. I literally have my only tagged things on my Instagram are the Funny Water Chronicles, where I just buy obscure water bottles and try them and rate them. And it's, hey, give the people what they want, though. You know, they love it. I actually get a lot of messages from people like, you should try this one, or like, what's the rating, or like, I agree. It's funny. I mean, hey, whatever.
I've heard multiple people bring that up with you of like oh yeah, like you need to try this one, like actually like having a conversation in person with you about
literally, it. I would say probably like I would average on each time that I literally just post on my story a picture of a water bottle and something like say it tastes crunchy or like something silly like that, which they do. I don't know if you've ever had a crunchy one, or like sometimes some of them taste like melted snow, and it's just like this. It's kind of unique flavor to it. But I will I'll do that in like ice like. Every time I make one, and I'm not just talking like reactions. Like if I were to include reactions, it would be definitely more. But like legitimate messages, I probably get like 6 to 8 every single time I post a water bottle.
Yeah, like you've got a following just for that.
I should.
You in a plug?
I've got a Voss water here, which isn't overly funny, but it's a funny bottle. It's a good, cool bottle, but I think it's
funnier than my Crest water.
That's right. Ryan, we'll let Ryan have it. Ryan did give me a hard time because it's a non-glass bottle Voss. It is a plastic water, so I will be in search. I'm going to start plugging this on the podcast. Maybe people start sending me waters where it's like, you just ship me a bottle of water. Somebody sent me bottle, or they didn't send it to me, they sent me a link to a bottle of water that was like, it was $11 for like half an ounce of water, and it's like some special like whatever water, and it made me think of Waterboy when he has like the melted Alaskan iceberg one. He's got like the special bottle of water that he gives them. I don't know when the last time you saw the movie was, but there's that reminded me of that. It's funny.
Your cinnamon roll, you were doing ratings with those too, right?
I was just posting cinnamon rolls.
You were just posting cinnamon. Yeah. That got a pretty good follow. You had a secret admirer send you a whole pack of cinnamon rolls at one point.
That is right. We did a 12-pack of Cinnabon, which is like $40.
Yeah.
Like, and I didn't know what to do with all of those cinnamon. I was very happy, but I didn't know what to do with all of them. That's a funny thing. Yeah, my you know, you have like your little bio thing. My bio says, if lost, return to Laurel. It says, let me pull this up, make sure I get this right, because I know it's kind of silly, but it's like funny water connoisseur, if lost, return to Laurel, got defined triad on Successful Entrepreneur podcast, and then it's a cinnamon roll appreciation page. So yeah,
no, I think we've gotten lucky. I think it was early on we noticed, I think it was Supplement Superstores and First Form, obviously where we used to work.
Mm-hmm.
They had requirements for their employees to post on their social media. And we kind of looked at it as an idea of, hey, you know, what would that look like if we did that? Like, that's actually a pretty cool idea. And at the time that we looked at it, it was just Trace and Alfonso working at the store. And both of them were fairly consistent about posting, especially Alfonso. And like Alfonso posts a lot of like workout and motivational stuff. Trace posts a lot of CrossFit and like goofy stuff about Sadie and his dogs. Mm-hmm. And it was like, man, like I feel like if I put a requirement to it, it might kind of like make it lean a little bit less authentic. So we've kind of just left it, and we've gotten really lucky since then that most of our employees are pretty active on social media. And I think that part of that is because they are from a younger age group, and they grew up with it a little bit more, especially compared to me, where I didn't have a Facebook page until I was a senior in high school. So I never built that as a habit growing up.
Yeah. Well, even think about what like social media culture, especially gym social media culture, is compared to what it used to be. Think of us just in college. Imagine bringing a tripod to the gym and filming yourself.
Ooh, yeah.
Like, that was like unheard of at the time, man. Like unless you were like a power lifter, and even then I think you would have gotten weird looks.
Oh yeah.
And now it's super common.
I see it all the time, and it doesn't ever seem weird to me.
It doesn't faze me at all.
I feel very weird every time I do it.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it's just part of gym culture is so weird anymore. I was this is actually a really funny story, because I just feel like, I don't know I don't know what's happened, but maybe it's just the gym that I go to. I won't say where I go, but it is a really interesting thing right now where like gym culture has just changed. And I don't know if it's a good thing. Like, I think a lot of it is good. I think it's a lot more like body positivity, like all that kind of stuff is great. But this is like, people's manners in general are very different. And maybe, again, this could be, I could be in an anomaly place here. Or I don't know, you might agree with me, but two things that have recently happened at the gym I go to that are hilarious to me and I just laugh about, but like are very strange. One, a guy was in the middle of a, busy gym, was supersetting 3 movements, which 2 of them were machines and 1 of them was a sled push, which is like, ooh, it's a lot of time. And it was one of the ab machines, and it's like, I don't do the twisty ab machine. I've gotten hurt on that before. It's like messed up my back. And so I will do like the like more crunch one. And I like that, like the weighted ones. And I asked him if I could work in, and he said no.
What?
He said no. And I'm like, bro, you're doing 3 movements and you're like taking a while. And he was like, well, I just don't feel very like safe or like, and I was like, huh? And I was like, man, are you pulling like COVID as a reason why you don't want me to do this? Like, come on. And so like, man, like it was like a really a weird thing because there's only one of the thing that I was going to do. It was the last thing I was doing before I was going to get in the sauna, and then I was going to leave. And I was like at a real like crossroads. Like, do I just take it while he's not there? But like he left like his bag, his phone, like his everything was at this machine. And I was like, dude, like really? Like, man. And I like, he came back around and I was like, man, like I'm going to hop in. I'll wipe it down when I'm done. But like, I just like, I could get all of my sets done before you get back.
Yeah.
And so what a but this, and actually now that I think about it, I think this is the same guy, which is maybe why this is funny. When I was at the gym the other day, I don't know if it was him for sure, but I think it was him. Maybe this is just a weird guy, not a gym culture thing. He had a Bluetooth speaker plugged into the wall, was just playing his own music out loud.
No way.
Just the middle of the gym, just blasting his own music on a Bluetooth speaker, and was just like, yep, I don't care. They're playing music overhead. Like there's 30 people. It's literally right next to the plug that he was plugged into is right next to the dumbbell rack. Like everyone is over there just listening to a mix of his music, the overhead music, and maybe their music. Like,
dude, he's never heard of headphones before.
Maybe they scare him too. I don't know.
Ah, jeez.
But never in all my days of going to the gym, I've been going to the gym for probably 15 years, 16 years now, maybe 7. It's been a long time, regardless. But like never, ever have I been somewhere where like someone was playing their own music out loud like that.
What if you had to guess, what age was he? Not to call anybody out.
But 45.
So I have another story about, sorry, Ryan, did you?
Yeah, Ryan's got something juicy.
Yeah.
I was going to say, knowing where you go to the gym, it's partly that gym.
That might be it.
It's also partly just the gym culture that you're starting to see pop up a lot lately.
Yeah.
But that gym specifically has more stories to come from it.
I'm sure it does. Well, and I think, and I'll let you get back to it, Kevin, but I think the thing that's really interesting too is you hear of like these influencer gyms where like I had a friend go down to one of the bigger influencer gyms, and she said like you can't even really work out. Like a guy like I had a tripod and told her not to use the bench behind him that he wasn't even using because she'd be in his frame and could be distracting. And so he was doing like a set of curls, and then he'd go look at himself, and then he would come back, he'd do another set of curls or like just a snippet of them. And it was like, it had nothing, it wasn't actually lifting. Like it wasn't the point of the workout. And she was like, oh yeah, like for like go and like, to get some social media points, like yes, great, but like in general, like to like daily workout, like absolutely not. It's like it's a really interesting thing.
That person's probably pretty lucky that Joyce Wool hasn't found their video.
Tell you what, man.
Dude, he's cleaning up the gym culture.
Right. I need to. I was going to be a reverse of Joyce Wool, and I was going to be like, "Hey, bro, let me work in." Like what? Like no one has ever said no to that ever.
Yeah. For those who haven't seen it, what's his Instagram handle? Is it like Joey Swole? You probably find it. But yeah, I'm sure most people have probably seen it at this point. But like anybody that's kind of got like a toxic, like, don't walk in front of my camera as I'm filming. It's like you're in a public gym. And he like,
calm down, dude.
Yeah, there was one that like some lady filmed somebody else doing drag curls.
Yeah.
And someone filmed them and made fun of them.
Yeah, they didn't even know it's a real workout.
Yeah.
Like a real movement.
And Joyce like got on there. He was just like, actually, this is what's called a drag curl, made famous or really popularized by Charles Glass.
Yeah. That's funny. Like,
yeah. And like, if you're going to make fun of someone, like maybe you know what you're talking about
That's
at least.
well, there's like, yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of obscure movements for like certain things that like maybe don't look like something. I've seen that one though, and I'm like, that's a legitimate movement. Like I don't know, or like somebody was doing like a neck workout, and somebody posted, and Joey's was like, well, that's actually like a really legitimate thing, like to strengthen your neck. And
but I wonder if that the person that made fun of him probably has neck pains too.
Probably so.
Yeah. But
I hope they do.
I feel like we're kind of getting like you know, you talk about the new gym culture, and I think a lot is influenced by, you know, people in their like late teens, early 20s that, you know, just have a very different mindset. But yeah, there's some weird characters in there that are old too. So
weird, and I think that's the best way to describe this guy, is a weird character.
The guy, there was a guy that was, I would guess he's probably in his 50s. Alyssa and I were just like, we both noticed him at the gym. And I'll tell you why in a second. But we both noticed him and both just had a conversation the whole ride home, just because we were dumbfounded. Like, what? Like, I don't even understand.
Is this
like,
person an alien? What's going on?
He legitimately was supersetting, not even exaggerating, half the equipment in the gym.
Yeah.
And I would see him on something, and then like I would see him, he wouldn't be there for 5 minutes. And then I would ask, like, hey man, are you done with this? And he's like, oh, I won't be back on that for another 10 minutes. So like he was fine with like people working in on him.
At least he's doing that.
But it was what like I'm sure there's some sort of like workout that he's either following or made up himself, but that's just kind of wild to me to, like, in a public gym, use half of the equipment.
The word that I think you're potentially avoiding, it's honestly, it's a little rude. Like it's one of those where you're like, man, like, come on. Like, I get it. Like we're all here to work out.
Yeah.
Like, we're all here trying to do something. So it's like, if you're going to be doing something like that, like, man, I understand, but maybe come at obscure times or like, but even then, like, I don't know. It's like, man, that's a lot. It's a lot to ask of everybody else.
I know I get super conscious of that. Of sometimes I've done supersets where I'm using like 2 machines, and it'll be like, it's the most ideal superset. And I only do that if it's like not super crowded and I see both are open.
Yeah, they're close to each other. And I'm still super like subconscious about that, or self-conscious about that. And I always pick something that it's like, hey, if someone does, I'm going to pick my main one and I'm going to hang out, put my stuff here. And the other one, I'm just going to jump on it as long as no one's there. Someone takes it.
And if someone takes it, I'm going to be fine with it. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not even going to tell them that I was on that. I'll just use something else that's similar.
Right.
But most of my, like, I end up doing a decent amount of supersets, but it's usually like, I'm going to do a machine and dumbbells together, like pair things together that it's like, I'm only going to take up one piece of equipment.
And I feel like supersetting is really ideally it's a buddy workout thing where, like, I get it. Like, there's times you want to do it even if you don't have a partner, but it's like, that's the best when it's like each of you can be on one thing and then you swap and then you swap and then you swap and then you swap. That's typically when it's like the most ideal.
Yeah. And it's because it's 2 people taking up 2 machines. It's not one
makes
person.
Sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
well, hey, before we get too far into this, we haven't started drinking yet, and that's a problem. So Kevin, why don't you, I'm getting uncomfortable. I need it. I'm just kidding. But yeah, Kevin, why don't you explain this one?
Una Vida. We're drinking tequila this time. We've drank bourbons in the past. We've got a pretty large array of different liquors over here. So we decided to do some tequila this time.
Heavy on the tequila and on the whiskey though,
for sure.
Those are at least my 2 favorites.
For sure. And I think we've stuck with bourbon so far. We haven't even ventured into like scotches or Japanese whiskeys or anything.
We haven't done an Irish. It's all been
no Irish, not even a rye, I don't think. So yeah, we're going to tequila today. This one's a cool one. I definitely I called for this one or wanted to do this one. This is actually owned by some friends of ours. Big friend, Brian Teach. He's our sales rep at First Form. Gosh, I say sales rep, but I think he's like over
VP of everything.
Yeah, he does over the whole wholesale department, which I think is like 30 people at First Form. He does formulations. He's run stores before. He's been with them longer than he was there before we got there.
Mm-hmm.
But
he's been there for a long time.
Yeah. Really, really cool guy. Good friend of ours. Always here for Sample Triad.
Yep.
We've done a number of events back in
Super
St. Louis
cool
with them, like gone to his house, had dinner kind of deal. Is part owners with Andy and Chris, who are owners of First Form and Supplement Superstores, and a couple other guys that have been in the spirits business, I believe in the tequila business for a while, and have a good understanding of everything. Yep. But yeah, they released this, I think, like a few years ago.
Yeah.
Very good tequila.
Yeah. You remember that time that you got Corey, your future brother-in-law, a bottle of Una Vida, brought it back all the way from St. Louis.
Yeah.
We decided to go bowling that night, and he left it sitting on the table inside the bowling alley. And surprisingly enough, when we went back in, it was gone.
It's not even like it's for tequila, it's definitely a little bit more expensive. It's not crazy, but it's just the fact that like you can't even get it. You might be able to get it in OKC now, but I don't even know where.
I haven't seen it. Oh, if you are in the Oklahoma City area and you are wanting to try it, Chicken and Pickle has it. Chicken and Pickle uses it a lot, and it's really good. We just drink it on the rocks, obviously, but it is a very good tequila. And if you do want to support it or at least try it, we do know for a fact that Chicken and Pickle has it because we drink a bunch of it when we're there. Do a quick cheers.
Yeah. Yeah, this is their Reposado. It's one of my favorites. It's aged a little bit, but not like as much as an añejo. So it's still pretty sweet, but it's got a good amount of flavor. So.
Oh, it is good.
Yeah.
It's a very good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a solid one for sure. But it's cool. I'm excited that we're venturing out a little bit and trying. Well, not trying. We've had plenty of this, but I think it's cool. It's a cool aspect of it. I like that we pick something different every time.
I know I was surprised when we first, because like I think most people know of like whiskey on the rocks, and like drinking like bourbon connoisseurs and whatnot. And it's just a known thing, but it was funny to me when it was like, oh yeah, no, the same kind of goes for like aged tequila. It's like, that's tequila. Why tequila is yellow. The same goes for like rum and like all these kinds of different spirits, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that was something. Well, because we've been collecting whiskey for how long now?
You started when you were still in Springfield, so I think
probably 7-8 years ago.
Yeah. I think it was
about that time.
Yeah, and
let's say 8.
Yeah, probably about 8. You've been into it for about 8 years, and then you got me into it after you moved to OKC, and so probably 6 or 7 for me.
Yeah, and then I remember when I went on that trip to Canada, went to one of the like Mexican restaurants that was in Edmonton when we were there. Really cool, and the people that we were with knew the owners, and they just kept bringing out tequila, and we were at a point where like for anybody who doesn't know, who is trying to enjoy whiskey for the first time, it is an earned taste.
For sure.
It takes a little bit. It's just like anything. You got to kind of do your due diligence of like trying different things and finding something you like, using a little bit of a mixer, and you kind of wind that down a little bit to like kind of learn to appreciate it a little bit more. And I'm sure some people just go like, oh, this is delicious, but
I'm sure finding at least a decent one too is important.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But, we'd kind of already gotten to that point where we were drinking it like on the rocks pretty regularly. And when I was in Canada, when I was in Edmonton, he kept bringing them out, and he was like, oh, these are nice, like sipping tequilas. And they were just coming out on the rocks. And I was at a point where I was used to drinking like 120 proof like bourbon on the rocks, and this like 90 proof tequila comes out on the rocks, and I'm like, this is delicious. Like this is super good. And then I was like, man, no, tequila is like, this is pretty cool.
It's actually smoother than a lot of those like really high proof hot bourbons. Canada though, classic place to get into tequila. So.
Like I don't know what I thought. I'm sure you can get a taco in Russia. Like I'm sure you can get it everywhere kind of thing. But it was like kind of like that was like the first place we went to eat when we got there. It was like, oh, we're in Edmonton. Like, okay, we're going to this Mexican restaurant. And I was like, that just broke my brain for a second. Like I don't know what I expected. Like it's not that different. It's just Canada. But I was like, aren't we supposed to be eating poutine or something? Like,
Yeah, no, they don't serve anything but poutine and
the tacos are just poutine tacos. Mexican restaurant.
Yep.
Classic. But that was when I think once I came back, I know that we kind of started venturing into sipping on some tequila and stuff like that too. I remember we'd kind of gotten into that. I'm sure you were into it too. I don't think that was like what all sparked it, but I know that definitely played a part in it because and then I started getting into it, and then I kind of went back to more drinking whiskey, and then you really got into tequila for a while, and then it got me back into it really for the first time.
And then you transitioned over to tequila, and then I went back to bourbon.
Yeah.
So we're just not on the same page.
Hey man, but it keeps our collection going well.
This is true.
Yours is looking nice. I wonder how many bottles between the two of us we have anymore of tequila and whiskey.
I'm pretty sure both of us have when our collection was combined, it was big, but I'm pretty sure both of us have a bigger collection now separately.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Our collection together, when we moved out, I believe was 41 or 42 bottles, and there was only a couple tequilas, so it was the vast majority of it was whiskey.
You know, it's made for really easy gifts for everybody.
Oh yeah.
So like, because like, you know, if it's my birthday and someone's like wanting to get me something, it's like, easy bet is get me a tequila or a bourbon.
Yeah.
And so I think like a good portion. I was going through my collection. I'm pretty sure the majority of my bottles are gifts, not ones that I bought.
Well, one of the things I was going to say too, before anybody freaks out that we have that much alcohol, is that I have never finished one of my bottles, and I think the two of us finished one of your bottles the other night. But it's only at social occasions do people come when they're like drinking all the different ones. Do we ever finish one?
Sure.
I only have a couple bottles where I have backup bottles, and those are just more like socially drinking ones. But it's like, the vast majority of the bottles that I have had for the entirety. Like the very first bottle I think I ever bought, I'm pretty sure I still have. So like we just don't drink through them. So it's like, when you hear, 40 plus bottles, it's like, but then it's like, no, I think this is probably more because just over time, there's no exit doors, just entering.
I think I've finished 3, and that's like, again, been into it for 6 or 7 years, and I've had, 15 guys over here all drinking. Mm-hmm. It's like, we've still only polished off 3. So.
Right. It's,
I hope the camera can see that Stella just shoved her face in the pillow. And
she's over it.
See it all.
Stella's over. She's hiding.
Yeah.
She's like, can you guys shut up?
So where is Alyssa?
Where's Mom? That's funny.
We wore him out this last week.
I bet.
We did a trip up. My family's got a little property north of St. Louis, and Alyssa and I went up there with the dogs and took somewhat of a vacation. But honestly, we didn't plan like work wise, like to like not have work. So it's like, but I think it was you that brought it up initially that, man, when you get to the point where, man, hey, this room right here is all people kind of like, I know Ryan's working a couple of shifts right now in store, but will be out of store next week. He just found out about that. Sure, a nice surprise. But I'm pretty sure you can hear that on the mic.
Yeah, I think you can.
Thomas is not currently in store as we get prepared to open up Yukon. He's doing a lot of back end work, a lot of HR work, a lot of preparing marketing for Yukon. But I know you brought up like, when it's, when you get to the point where you're not having to work those hours, which I'm pretty sure, everyone at the store has some sort of goal like that to not be in store eventually. Mm-hmm. But when you get to that point, you kind of get to, if you want to go take a trip, like, it's like, man, you don't even have to necessarily take off work. Like you want to go to Colorado, like, take a summer trip or something. It's like, man, it'd be cool to like, a lot cooler to work in a cabin up in Colorado than just, here like in an office. So that's kind of what we did is we went to my family's property. It's about 7.5 hours away from here. And there's a cabin, a lake, some land. It's a lot of hunting land, but kind of just sat. It was beautiful weather. So we just sat on the deck out there, sat inside with the big windows and just sat on the laptop and did work. And when we were done, we went fishing, but we took the dogs on a walk to like a long walk, like twice a day. And it's out in the middle of nowhere. So we can Stanley is not on the leash the entire time because I mean, he's just naturally the goodest boy.
Yeah.
But
He'd be scared to run off.
yeah. But
Stella's the killer.
yeah. So we let her off the leash a little bit, but there's, if she sees a rabbit or something,
She trying to kill it.
yeah. I'd be okay if she took a little run. She'll wear herself out.
Yeah.
And she's just be in the woods. She'll come back. Alyssa was a little nervous about it. So we let her off the leash a little bit, but like
Yeah.
at least put her on the long one, took them on a long walk. They loved it up
Oh,
there.
I'm sure.
though.
I saw the story post of like the dogs just like rubbing themselves in the grass and rolling around. It's really funny.
Stella going for swims in the lake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She's currently leaned up against me, pawing at my hand to pet her more. I'm coming. I'm sorry. Yeah. Speaking of that though, one of the, Ryan and I were talking about this right before, and you and I were talking about this a little bit ago when we were checking in, is it being my first full week of not having like necessarily like shifts in the in-store responsibility in that same way. And it is so weird.
Yeah.
Dude, it is it's
Yeah.
like, man, it is definitely one of those like, when you just feel like you forgot something and you're like, what did I forget today? Like I left something at home. It's just that feeling for like an entire week straight. So a little more anxious this week than usual, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And it's super strange because there's less of a time constraint on when you're doing things. So like, normally if I work, I don't know, whatever, 12 to 6, 9 to 3 or whatever one of our normal shifts are, once I'm done, I can, kind of, if I've got some projects and stuff, and kind of do them at my own pace or, go do whatever I want. If I'm hanging out with Laurel, like, or going to jiu-jitsu or like whatever I'm doing, it's not a big deal. When you don't have like a structured, like, here's your hours, like in the store, they're like start and finish. It is so weird, man. I don't like it.
Yeah.
like I like it. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't want to sound like ungrateful, but like it is so, and I think you can attest to this though, is that especially, it being my first week, it is like the most odd feeling. Like you just like, I like structure. I like to build structure around myself. I definitely perform best in structure. And so it's like figuring out, like leading up to this week, I was like trying to structure myself and I didn't even know how. Like you just kind of have to play it by ear for a little bit. And so I think I'm gonna do my best to kind of continue to do that. I feel like I got a lot done. Like I had a good week. I got everything on my to-do list done, like all that kind of stuff. I did plenty of jiu-jitsu, but like it is weird.
Yeah.
Super weird.
It's so funny because I know even myself that it's just something that you kind of look forward to of just,
Mhm.
and, don't get me wrong. I've talked about it a number of times is, it's a lot of fun working in the store and
It is.
talking with customers,
Hanging
but
out with your buddies.
yeah, you're talking about supplements, some of the time it's mostly just kind of hanging out with people, just, building relationships and just making friends.
Yeah. Or hanging
And-
out with coworkers.
Yeah. And yeah, that too. But especially as you get involved with, back end responsibilities and you just get a lot to do, you're like, man, it'd be really nice to just, have the freedom to like not have these time constraints and be able to work on things as I need to and just kind of have that freedom. And you like start to really look forward to this. And then it finally comes and you have, and you're not used to it. Yeah. It's something that just, I think nobody really expects. And I know that was something that like, I really struggled with myself personally is when I first bumped down to, there was a period of time that I wasn't doing full time and I bumped down to, I think it was 14 hours in the store. And I was, I was like, okay, I've got all this time to like work on all this stuff and do all these things. And it was like, I felt like I had to do that almost all of the time. Yeah. And it took me a while to figure out I need to set time constraints for myself of, okay, I'm not going to do any work before 9 a.m. and I'm not going to do any work after 9 p.m.
Yeah.
And those are the hours that the store's open. So it worked out, pretty well that everything else lines up in there. But it's one of those that, allowing myself that grace, because otherwise it would be, 10, 11 o'clock at night. It's like, I'm just kind of watching TV. It's like, I could be working.
Right. Now. That's the thing I was even telling you before this. It's like, I'd have, I do jujitsu at 8 a.m. a couple times a week. And I would show up to like 8 a.m. jujitsu, which I show up to every single week. Like, don't get me wrong. This is not new. Like I'm there like every Monday and Wednesday at 8 a.m. I'm there for jujitsu. I'd pull in and I just like had this like looming feeling of guilt. Like I could be doing something else. Like, what's the expectation? You know, it's just very strange. Like you have an expectation change, and an expectation change that definitely changes how you feel, even in, you know, like day-to-day stuff. You know, you feel like it's going to be, and I think Ryan can attest to this because we were talking about this earlier, but it's like you feel like you have more freedom, but the freedom doesn't feel as free, and it's like it's a super strange thing. It sure takes time to get used to. Ryan now, he's been, you know, like more limited hours in the store, so now, you know, when he looks at it, he's like, oh, very nice.
That is we found his funny bone.
Tickles right. It gets him. Oh, these are layups too.
Yeah. We'll have to rewatch the movie and just bring up some great ones in meeting.
Yeah, this is gonna be good. Okay. but it is just like a super weird thing where I think it's, you know, it's just the growing pains of doing it, where it's just kind of like it's an interesting time for sure. And again, like I'm sure 90% of people anywhere would trade spots with me right now. So I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, because I'm definitely not. It is a nice thing and a good while we're getting in preparation for UConn, and there's plenty of things for me to be doing. But it is a very unique thing. Like you feel a little lost.
Yeah. It's just, I think the point is like, it's a better spot. And I like where I'm at, and I don't have, you know, shifts in store, and it allows me to constantly be able to be the fire extinguisher that I have to be sometimes. Is, you know, if I'm on shift and, you know, things are happening, it's like, man, sometimes there's a couple hours where I can't handle stuff, and that's can be pretty stressful.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, so it's something that you look forward to, and you just assume there are absolutely no downsides to it at all. It's like, there's a couple surprising ones in there.
Grass is always greener. I feel like, you know, like you look at it and you're like, oh, this is, and then you're like, oh man. But I think it's just like anything, you know, it's funny as it is, but like I used to try to schedule one of my days off around jujitsu, and excuse me, when I'd have like jujitsu in the evening, and I actually stopped doing that because I was worse on my non-working days at like getting ready for class. So like anybody who's never done jujitsu before, especially at the gym that I go to, we don't have air conditioning. And so it's like, you have to literally prepare like partially the day before and the day of like, and I'm sure the same thing with like racing and stuff like that, where it's like, I have to be making sure I'm getting in my water yesterday, and I need to be getting my water in throughout the day today. And I need to be making sure that I'm eating, and I'm eating at good times, and I'm making sure that like my food will be settled by the time I'm doing this. Cause like we do a lot. We do like 10 5-minute rounds, which for anybody who does jiu-jitsu, that's a boatload. And so if I'm free to my own devices that day, I will like, what would happen is I'd show up to jiu-jitsu and I'd had 20 ounces of water in like half a meal 7 hours ago. And I'd be like, and I'd do terrible. And now, but like when I would work, it would be much more structured. I'd have my water, like all my things timed out a lot better. I knew where I needed to be at what time. And it's like, it just like goes to show how much like structure can be beneficial for those things.
Yeah.
But it is super interesting. You'd think my day off, I'd be like nothing but prepared. And it's like, nope, that's my worst.
Yeah. You don't have anything to work around. So like, I know even when I was just doing a couple of shifts in store, it made it easy to plan out my week. Cause it was like, okay, I just plan everything around this. But when there's nothing that there's not even a single stake in the ground. It's just like all this stuff, and it can happen whenever. It's just like, oh God. I know I was telling you, I spend sometimes like 4 or 5 hours on Sunday. It's kind of a day for Alyssa and I to chill, and, you know, we'll put on Bob's Burgers, like, I'll just sit on the couch, but I'll sit like with my like planner and my phone and schedule my week for sometimes 4 or 5 hours just to know when I'm going to be doing everything and how to be most efficient with my time. So
and I don't blame you. I'm sure it's probably something I need to do.
I'm curious if Ryan, if you've had any struggles with that since you've had less and less hours in the store.
I don't know if I'd have really any struggles with it. I think like I was telling him earlier, for me, the first week it was, I'm gonna do everything, and I did everything, and then I realized the next week it's like, well, I can't just do everything. Yeah. And so just trying to find that balance of, well, this works best on these days and this works best on these days. So for me, it's been Mondays and Tuesdays, it's try to knock out most of the social media stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then Wednesday, Thursday, I typically work in store. So getting stuff that I need at like, if it's something I'm wanting to film Dom and Norman, that makes it a little bit easier to go down there and do that stuff. And so it's just been slowly finding more of a routine when there is no routine.
Yeah, right. Because I think that that's the biggest thing is like when I'm working, it's like it's almost like I just have like stakes in the grass. Like I have markers where I can like, you know, at a certain point or whatever, it's like I've got this, I've got X, Y, and Z to do that are very like that have a lot more time constraints, I feel like, on them, where it's like, you know, if a shipment comes in, that's going to be done in the next hour, not in the next 2 days. So it's like that's one of those where it's like you definitely have to it adjusts your whole day a lot more. And I don't know, it's just like I'm up earlier. I'm like, but you know, I feel like this week went well, but it was definitely a change of pace. It's definitely interesting for sure.
Yeah, you did. I mean, you went from 40 hours to no hours.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, most people like myself, I know mine was like gosh, a little back and forth, but in the long run, probably about a year and a half transition getting my hours out of store. And I know Ryan's kind of been in a similar boat. So yeah, you jumped in that cold water like cannonballed in there. So
You know, and it got better as the week went along. But like Monday, I was just like very wide-eyed. Like during the day, I was like, I'm just trying to figure out how to do this.
did this Monday go more smoothly than last Monday?
Definitely, yeah. This Monday was really solid. This Monday was kind of good because like I knew that we were going to check in, so it was kind of just like putting the cherries on everything. It was like, okay, like everything that I'd done most of the grunt work of it like last week, and now it was like, okay, just like tying the bows on all of my projects. And so that was nice. I was at 2 different coffee shops today, and I was only at 2 because one closed. They closed at 3, and I was like, oh, let's go to another one.
You sound more productive when you've been at 2, though.
Yeah, I feel very productive. Yeah, I was at 2 coffee shops today. I've spent $19 on lattes today, so this is fiscally very responsible of me as well. And I was downtown Oklahoma City, so I also spent $8 in parking. And but it's fun. That is the coolest aspect. Like I will say that like coffee shop days are my favorite days. At least they are now that I do them very sparingly. I'm sure like doing it every day would probably get old, but like right now it's just kind of fun where I can go up to the counter and grab a little something to eat, or I can go up to the counter and grab a coffee or whatever. It's kind of nice, and I just listen to music and I can just like hammer things out. That's what I did a lot when I was writing the employee handbook, which was the beast in itself.
I think the people would want to know. I know Kevin was a big Coffee Jerks guy. What coffee shops are you rotating through?
So my personal favorite one right now, and it might be just proximity to me because I'm currently Laurel, so I essentially live there. But she's right off 23rd and like Classen. And so Stitch is probably one of my favorite places downtown to just like go and hang out. It's a very good environment. It's very bright, a lot of windows. They got like a plant shop in there. The food's really good. They have like really solid like tacos and burritos and
Pop-Tarts.
Yeah, they do have Pop-Tarts. I didn't get any Pop-Tarts. But their food is honestly like genuinely good, and they have really good lattes, and it's just like a nice, like it's just a solid environment. It's very bright. The seats are very comfortable. And then I left there when they closed at 3:00, and I went down the road to Clarity Coffee, which was my first time in there. It was a very cool place too. It's pretty small. But it was it was solid. But yeah, I was tallying up today like how much money I spent on stuff, and it was like I literally spent, gosh, I probably spent $5 in parking, and then it was like I had spent probably $11 on lattes, and then I got a burrito and like one of their like breakfasty burritos and a fish taco at Stitch. And that was, I want to say like $20 for a burrito and a taco. Yeah, it was like I spent $40 today.
I think that's why I've really liked coffee.
But I put it on the company card, so it was fine. Just kidding. Just kidding, Alyssa.
Yeah, I think that's why I've really liked Coffee Jerks.
Mm-hmm.
It's one, I really, really like their coffee, and that's always been kind of the go-to. We get Coffee Jerks for meetings on Fridays.
Yeah.
Get a big order.
Yeah.
But their Deer Creek location it's really big. It's got a lot of space to work.
Yeah.
Everyone that works there is really cool. There's really like decent policies there. So I always get a cup of coffee. Nitro Brew's the go-to. But because I don't want to just go in there and like not buy
always buy
anything.
something.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we'll go in there and work. I do sometimes now. I kind of work wherever. Like I work at both stores sometimes. I work from home a little bit.
Yeah.
Work at Coffee Jerks a little bit. There was one point in time though where when Norman was opening and we had hired everybody in preparation for Norman to open, but Quail was the only store that was open, and there were just so many people there.
Yep.
And I could just not get work done because it was just too much.
Mhm.
So I would do all my work alone at Coffee Jerks, and with Norman opening, I would do like my mornings there. Actually, probably sometime until the afternoon. I would stop by at the Quail Springs location,
Mhm.
and then I would go to Norman, and Alyssa and I would do a little bit of build out. But then I started finally like totaling like the amount of hours that I was spending at Coffee Jerks, and it was like 20 or 30 hours a week. But the big thing about it though is they let me bring my own food, which I always walk around with lunch box with like food prep in it, so I could like bring my own food in there and save a little money.
I'm sure Kenny understands that.
Yeah.
I feel like the Yukon Coffee Jerks location will definitely be one that I will hit as I start doing some more things out that direction.
It's a good one.
Mm-hmm. I haven't been there yet. I haven't been to that one yet. So
fake fan.
Yeah, I've passed it a number of times, but I have not actually stopped in there.
I give Will crap all the time because he knows I'm a fan of coffee, but he also knows like, hey, I'm friends with Kenny.
Mhm.
Kenny's the owner. He's got a couple of partners, but we know Kenny really well, and I really like the coffee a lot, and I like to support him.
Yeah.
But Will talk to me about, it's like, oh, you like coffee? Like, oh, have you tried coffee from this place? And I'm like, no, I only drink from Coffee Jerks. I'm like, wait, are you drinking coffee from other places?
Yeah. How dare you, William? Yeah, I feel like whenever we're heading out there, I'll be doing that more. They've got good food though too. Like I like the burritos at Coffee Jerks are really good. Like all that kind of stuff definitely makes a difference.
For sure.
Like if I'm gonna be there, even if I do bring food or whatever, it's part of it. I don't know. It's part of like sitting there and hanging out there is like grabbing a little snack too.
Yeah, their burritos are pretty solid.
Yeah,
I've only had them
about 500 of them.
That is our morning. For those that don't know, we do a Friday morning meeting at the Quail Springs location for everybody. We're starting to do some individual store meetings about once a month, but most Fridays we're all meeting. The whole team, or pretty much the whole team, is meeting at 8 a.m. an hour before we open. And as kind of a incentive is we get a Coffee Jerks order in the morning. So we'll get a handful of coffees and some drinks and whatnot, and a massive bag of breakfast burritos.
always a massive bag of breakfast burritos.
It's a good time though. Meeting's one of my favorite times.
Yeah, meeting's great. No, it is a good time. It is something to look forward to. I feel like a lot of people on staff really like it too, especially because there's like, free food. That's always cool too.
Yeah.
But it's always a good time at meeting.
Yeah. Especially now with 2 locations, that I'm sure, especially with 3, it's like one time for everybody to kind of be together, because it's very rare that happens.
It's a very unique thing too. Just sparked my mind as you were kind of talking about it. And I don't think we've talked about this before, but we've talked about how like things have changed and how we've had to like adjust at times where, from going to 1 store to 2 stores. One of the big ones that we've talked about is like the adjustment of meeting and how meeting has to change, because you start first and foremost, like having too many people to fit in any space that we currently have.
Yeah.
If we were to have another store to staff up, if we were to staff up every store like Quail is staffed, like, no, not a chance could we fit anywhere.
Nope.
And, then it becomes, people have to open those other stores on Friday mornings. It's not a situation where, so for anybody who doesn't know, which obviously wouldn't, but like typically as of right now, one person calls into meeting. And so that's a really interesting aspect, because calling into meeting is not exactly the same as being there. We have like a little speaker thing that is like a conference speaker to try to do as much as possible. But there's things that the phone doesn't always work great. Sometimes you lose signal a little bit as you're driving or as you're at the other store. And so it's like you miss certain things from meetings, and it's like,
not to mention there's a dozen people in the room, and just like trying to hear everybody can be a little tough sometimes.
for sure. And we've got, certain people sit further away or quiet, or some people, like whatever, where that can definitely play a factor where it's like, I mean, I've been on the phone plenty of times where it's like, I have no idea what some people are saying, and it's also a thing where it's like, not anybody's fault, but you get so used to just being there where like, I've remembered times where like myself or other people have like asked questions through the phone and everyone nods. And then you're like, hello? And then like, oh, sorry, everyone nodded. Like,
we're a bunch of idiots.
Yeah, like everybody just nodded and was
Yeah.
like, but it is one of those where like, and then adding a third store and hopefully a fourth store and hopefully a fifth store. It's like, well, now what? We've got 5 people on the phone. It's like, well, okay, well now this is like a little not feasible and definitely not efficient. And it's like a lot of this information isn't necessarily getting passed on the same way. So we're transitioning, into doing more single store meetings, like individual store meetings, and getting kind of more used to that, because as time progresses, like eventually, like out of pure necessity, we'll have to have maybe, once a month, we have like a bigger meeting where we meet somewhere. Probably won't even be a store at that point. That's how, S2 did it. Like,
Yeah.
And most of the time, they would meet at like a big restaurant where they'd rent out a big area or like a conference area or whatever.
And we'll have to do it at a different time too, like maybe in the evenings, because in the mornings, like that's why we're missing people, is because they're at those stores about to open it.
Right. And what a tough thing. I think that's like having like being a part of a business that's growing is like, it's not any decision that I've had to make, but I'm sure it was a stressful one. I can imagine it, because it's stressful to think about it now, is like just deciding when to have a meeting.
Yeah.
Like where like people can be there and pay as much attention as possible.
We've changed it a couple of times.
Yeah. It's like, what an interesting thing though. It's like one of those that you just think of like as a given, like, oh, we should just have a meeting. Well, it's like, well, it doesn't really work like that.
It's how many people have started working at the store, or it's just meetings are on Friday morning at 8 a.m. They've been that way for, I think, 3 or 4 years now.
Right.
So
it's been a while.
Yeah, that's just what it is. It's like, well, someone made that decision in the first place.
Right. And well, it's one of those like meeting lasts long and then we start getting customers, and it's like this stuff like that happens all the time. And so it's definitely an interesting aspect. So yeah, with saying that, it's like the stress of like having to change eventually when meeting is going to be is not going to be the most fun thing either.
Wasn't easy to set in the first place.
No, right. Well, and this used to happen at the hospital all the time. Like transport would be like, we should have more meetings. We should have more meetings. And I was like, well, guys, we are open 24/7, 365. Patients need to be moved literally every minute that we are here. We can't just say like, sorry, hospital and everyone who needs their procedures, like transport's having a meeting right now. It's like, well, it doesn't really work that way, guys.
Some of our first meetings, I think you were around for some of our first meetings when it was just Chad, Vincent, myself, and you. And it was, I think we had them on shift, and it's like, oh, that makes sense. At least one person can be there. We're all, available during the day. And I think it was the first time, it was like this second or third meeting we had, one person, because like as customers come in, someone's got to jump up front and take them. But it was like one time someone went to go take a customer, and that customer needed like an hour's worth of help, and we're just sitting back there waiting for the fourth person to come back. We're like, this doesn't work.
Yeah, this doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
But this is a super interesting thing. But yeah, I mean, out of pure necessity, like we're talking about, like it will eventually have to change to being a time where, like, again, we can have everyone show up, or a situation where like, we can make it where it makes the most sense, because having 5 people on the phone doesn't make sense. So it's like individual store meetings you can do a lot better at that point. Everybody can be there, everybody can hear it, and you just have that one person going up front, and if they have to miss a little, like whatever.
Right.
But yeah, that'll be a fun time.
It's funny to think about like how the original structure was, and like how that's like we're getting really close to changing, because we've always done a weekly meeting since the days of Chad and Vincent. We got that implemented in, I think, in our second year. And started doing that again when they transitioned out and hired employees. But there was a time where it was like, I remember when it was just Trace and I at one point, and it was like, there's no need to set a meeting. Like, we're both here, bro. So
yeah, right. Well, because at that point, like we talked about before, like we were do it in the evening, sitting in the barfus, and we do it over Skype.
Yeah.
It's funny.
But yeah, I remember when we implemented because they were lasting really long, because it was like everybody had kind of individual stuff. So that's where, we were kind of struggling with that a little bit, and we finally implemented individual check-ins. So I would check in with everybody once a week because it was, when there was 4 of us, it was everybody had responsibilities outside of just taking customers. It was, the 4 of us running the entire business. So I had to kind of like check in and make sure we're all on the same page, rowing in the same direction. And it's funny, man, because that is still implemented. And there are, if you don't include myself, 12 people that work at the store. So that's 12 meetings a week.
Yeah.
And
start to stack up.
It's finally at the point where it's just not feasible and it doesn't necessarily make sense. We're I've built a plan of like, okay, what are the most necessary ones, like one of the ones that have to happen on a weekly basis, and it's like, okay, we'll prioritize those, and eventually we'll probably lean it up to be just those on a weekly basis, and everybody else is just kind of everything else is just kind of a as needed basis,
or delegated down to managers,
or exactly, delegated down to managers. And but even now it's like, man, this kind of isn't feasible at this point now. You like, even before UConn's open and everything, is starting to pull. This is the first time ever that I haven't met with every single person every week. So I'm skipping maybe 1 or 2 every week because it's like, because it's one of those of my schedule doesn't match up with theirs, that I just cannot meet with this person as well. I don't have, it does not make sense for me to be able to do that.
Well, and especially when it gets spread across 3 cities.
Yeah, that too.
What I mean? The distance between our, for anybody who doesn't know, maybe people who aren't local that are listening or anything, like the distance between our Quail Springs location and our Norman location's what? 40 minutes?
Yep.
I would say 40. Yeah, that sounds, well, you'd know. You live up here driving down there. So
that'll drive a lot.
Yeah. So that makes sense. Yeah, it's about 40 minutes. And so it's like, if you're trying to meet with as many people as possible, like, well, a lot of those people are down in Norman. We have plenty of people who live in Norman who like work for us now, or even Blanchard. So it's like, that's an extra 25 minutes if we were to try to do that. But yeah, it's like then adding UConn onto that. It's like, well, now, you'd spend all day just driving those places or trying to.
Seriously. That's where I try and like, I talk about like planning on my week, and that's a big part of it, of like, where am I going to be when, and like, what's the most efficient way to meet with the most people at one time.
Right.
And yeah, it's taken up a good portion of my week to the point where it's like, like eventually, like hypothetically, hopefully we make it to the point where we've got, 100 employees. It's like, that just doesn't, that's impossible. So right. I'm sure it's possible, but like, that just doesn't even make sense. It's just simply not worth it by a long shot.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's funny. Yeah. No, Kevin, sorry. You have to meet with every single person individually. And, for anybody who's not been in one of those, they only last an hour usually. So just 100 hours a week.
Yeah. That's with someone like, especially with some of the newer ones, like newer employees, like I still try and check in, but it's one of those that usually a little bit quicker because they don't have the back end responsibilities that some other seasoned employees have at this point. They will, but not at this point. So there's just not a lot for us.
They're not going over a bunch of social media posts or like designs or, HR policies, or Anthony going through coaching plans or like whatever.
Exactly.
A lot more to do there.
Yeah. Yeah. Certain meetings, Ryan's meeting lasts almost as long as my Thomas meeting, but you got a lot to cover on it, right?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a talker, so
Ryan is less of a talker.
What?
So what's the time he has? I'm gonna beat it this week.
Oh, you're on. I'm gonna have the longest check-in. Oh wait, I already
Your
did mine.
check-in's already done.
Dang it! Oh man.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go ahead and cancel both your guys' meetings this week.
Ryan, we did it. No, but yeah, but like we've also implemented kind of just. It's funny because I don't think we ever really like spoke about it. It just started happening where we'd have manager meeting after regular meeting, and then that was just out of necessity of like, hey, can we go outside and talk about some stuff? And then it's just like it started turning into like a regular thing that we were doing, and then it's like, oh gosh, that's like
super beneficial.
It's a super important think tank. Like,
yeah. I think it was the first one I had like a couple of things that I needed to bring up at meeting, but it was like, this is better if I just talk about it with you and Anthony, the managers, as opposed to.
And now Preston. Woo.
This is Preston's second week as manager.
Yeah. God, he's killing it too.
He is.
He's a stud. He's got it.
But I remember just having a couple of things. I was like, hey, like, you guys mind like just talking about a couple of things after meeting? And it was like the most beneficial thing we had done in a long time. It's like, maybe we should do this on a regular basis.
It's the right balance of like limiting input with also like people, and no offense to anybody, this is just time, I think, more than anything. And it's not like I have the most time in the company, but like an understanding of what is important, what's like maybe less important when it comes to like having a more bird's eye view, I feel like. But I think that those are some of our most like beneficial talks, because it's just a solid think tank of people who can like input, but we can get through it quickly. And it's,
I think that's a big lesson that I learned fairly early on. I think it was when we had maybe 5 or 6 people. Is there was a time that, because we've always done a big thing for us in our marketing is t-shirts, and we try and design a new t-shirt every single time we release one. We've never released one twice.
Yeah, like exactly the same.
Yeah. So a lot of times it's myself. Alyssa's put a lot of designs together. Ryan's done a couple of designs. He's done a lot of the Define Nutrition stuff now. He's actually fully in charge of that. But
done some cool ones.
Yeah, he's got a cool one coming for Sample Triad.
Ooh, you heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, I've already signed up to buy 2 of them. So.
Wow. Did you put your deposit down?
Yes. So we were designing t-shirts, and we try and do one once a month. And there was a point in time where we had a couple, 2 or 3 different designs that we were kind of like developing and working on. And we went to the group, and I was like, hey, I'm kind of at a sticking point now. Like, let's go to meeting with these designs, see if we can kind of try and get a decision on one of them, and maybe trying to get some ideas to push forward. And I brought it up, and there were just so many ideas.
That was your first mistake.
Yeah, and it was one of those that we ended up in a worse position, because there's now even more ideas and no progression with the ideas that we already have. And it was like, man, this probably would have done better if it was just like me and 1 or 2 other people working on it. It's like nothing against, all those other people, and they were all good ideas, but it was just too much to handle. That we learned that lesson really quickly is you can't always brainstorm with a big group of people. You have to keep it limited to a certain point.
Do you want this design or this design? Well, what if we did a design like this?
That has turned into one of my biggest pet peeves. It's like, hey, out of these 2 options, what do you like most? And someone coming up with a third option of like, well, what if we did even something different? I'm like, that is not what I asked you.
That's too funny. Yeah, but right. And again, though, it's like you don't want to like. It's an interesting thing, I feel like, in segues, but like you don't want to like steal like someone's excitement away from like trying to have input. But it's like that's where I feel like you have to be really smart about what you bring up in front of everybody, and not, because probably more than anything, like you don't want to shoot someone down, like who is like excited to be bringing something. Like you don't want to be like, hey, shut up, I need a different answer right now. And it's like you don't want to, like, even if that's not how you would say it, but it's like you don't want to shut someone down who's like showing excitement. Like I feel like that's such an important thing when it comes to just like, what's the word I'm looking for? Employee morale is like just not killing people's excitement.
That's been a big one that I've had to learn how to do. Is if something's brought up, that like an idea that is, even a good idea, but I just know isn't necessarily feasible for us. Like maybe just, even just not yet kind of deal, is I have to be super, super delicate, because that very easily turns it like they're putting themselves out there.
Right.
And if I just stomp it down.
Right. Well, and that can happen easily because you're focused on something and you're just like, not right now. Like, and that might to you have just been like, oh, it's just like, just a second. But that can turn into somebody who was like, oh, Kevin, like the owner, like this like thought my idea was bad, or like didn't want to hear me. And it's like, it can kill morale in somebody and excitement really fast.
And they could have ideas in the future that they now just don't bring up because they're worried about getting shut down.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we've talked about it even in situations of like, gosh, I feel like a number of times where, we have a lot of talks about like how to handle situations when it comes to employees or whatever, whether it's like HR advice, just because it's some of the experience that I have, or just like people in general. But we'll talk about like, I think there's been a couple different instances where it's like, hey, maybe somebody was doing something not exactly correctly, but they were doing it like, what's like the old end for anybody who's played sports. It's like, if you're going to be wrong at 100 miles an hour. Like you've got your emphasis. You're very excited, even though you weren't doing this perfectly, you were still giving it everything. And it was like, I know we've had situations where it's like, sure, we could make this small correction, but this small correction may drop their effort by 50%. And I'd rather them keep their effort in a slight slightly incorrect direction than try to change it completely and lose the effort.
Yeah. I know we've had to work with that a lot in training.
Yeah.
Is, they're doing 3 things right, but one thing wrong. It's like, hey, don't try and fix the one thing, or like be very careful about fixing the one thing.
You take the wind out of their sails.
Right. Because if you try and correct the one thing, you might stop them from doing 2 other ones.
Right.
So now you're only doing 2 out of 4.
Well, and we've even done it where it's like people are, like they're just super excited and they're just like, their morale's super high. They're super excited about Triad. They're super excited about this. They're super excited about that. And it's like we're saying, it's like, the worst thing we can do is take that from them. Whether it was, we've had situations of people who, again, they were doing everything at 100 miles an hour. They just didn't know what direction they needed to be going in.
Right.
And it's like, okay, cool. Well, how do we handle this situation? And one of the things that you and I always bring up when we're talking about handling a situation with somebody like that is like, first and foremost, nothing we can do. We have to make sure that anything that will take their excitement away has to be taken off the table. Like, we can't do anything in talking to them, trying to adjust or trying to fix this that's going to take, like, maybe they don't have a lot of direction right now, but the worst thing we can do is kill their excitement, because killing their excitement's not going to give them direction. So now they have no direction and no excitement. And now what do you have? And so
I'd rather have excitement in the slightly wrong direction
1,000%.
than direction but no excitement.
1,000%. And that's the thing is, like, not saying you don't correct people or try to fix situations, but if you do it in the wrong way or you come too harshly or whatever, dude, it's just like anything, right? Where it's like, taking 80% of the wind out of someone's sails can take half a second to do, and it might take 6 weeks to come back.
Right.
Like that's a tough deal, man. Like, just handling that. But it's like, we've had those conversations like a number of times of, it's just like, cool, if we handle it this way, or if we even bring it up, they might kill their excitement. And it's like, not worth it. Nothing is worth losing that. Like, that's the thing that's paramount, what's the word I'm looking for? But that is the paramount currency as an employee, is excitement.
Yeah.
And it's like, even if you're slightly off, as long as you're not doing something catastrophic, I'd rather not correct you and keep your excitement. And then hopefully we can progress as time goes on.
That's been super interesting is obviously there's usually a way to bring up something to make that correction of that one thing, but keep excitement. It takes a lot of creativity and sometimes a lot of planning. Sometimes there's hour-long conversations with not just you, but Anthony as well, to plan how to properly handle something to like
all
keep
3 of us, like,
yeah,
manager meeting.
Manager meetings last like 2-3 hours sometimes.
That's a lot of times what we're doing.
Yeah. But yeah, it's super interesting that sometimes it's just better to like just not
step
even
away.
Yeah. Just to leave it. It's like, man, we're gonna, like, there's no way that we could do this without risking excitement. It's better to just leave it and leave the excitement as well.
It's gold, man. It is the most valuable thing that an employee can have. And it's like, sure, everybody needs coaching, everyone needs correcting, but there's times where it's like, especially if somebody feels like they're doing something really well and you're slightly altering it to just something that you think would be slightly better, and then it's like, you're going to have to crumble their world with it. Oh, nope.
Yeah.
Don't touch that.
So that's you brought up a kind of a metaphor that I really like. It's a Jocko metaphor. Assuming that he's the one that came up with it, but he's the one I heard it from, is that leadership currency is that as a leader, you only get a certain amount of currency to spend, and you earn it, through various things and respect and building a relationship and, working hard yourself. And you can only spend it on certain things. So if you're constantly correcting every single little thing someone does, that you're eventually going to run out of currency and they're not going to take you seriously anymore. And you get to something that seriously needs correcting, and you've got no leadership currency left to spend it on. So you have to be careful and have to pick and choose where you spend that currency on.
Yeah, dude, I think that's a really underrated thing that I feel like, because, not everybody does this, but I feel like I've at least had experience with like certain managers or like certain jobs where it's like, do this and do it exactly like this. And if you don't do it exactly like this, like you fucking suck. And I don't want any part, I mean, not to bring up past things, but it's like, in a situation where I didn't handle something exactly the way, like, I've been literally like kicked, like, why didn't you do it like this? And I'm like, oh man, I don't think you realize, like, sure, I could have done that slightly different, but like, oh man, like,
Yeah.
I hate to be the person who like, but man, I was like, oh, I just lost a lot there. Like, hope
Yeah.
that was probably
I'll fix that, but not the next 5 things you say.
right.
Yes.
Like, oh man, like, yeah, you might have just corrected that single thing, but like you physically doing that, like, oh, I don't have any respect for anything you have to say from now on, probably. In him in that situation, like it doesn't have to be a situation where like somebody does something like that to lose somebody. That was obviously like a pretty intense situation that was pretty uncalled for, and I felt like pretty inappropriate. But like the point overall being of like, it doesn't take something that intense to like lose somebody. Sometimes it's just incorrect coaching. Sometimes it's coming at it the wrong direction, or like understanding. This is a really interesting thing where like understanding how to coach to certain people.
Yeah.
That's such a huge thing, right? Where like we have all these different people that work for us that all need different things. You know, I had a situation at the hospital where I had to coach 2 different people very differently. Somebody had to build up very highly, like, you're my rock, like you do all this stuff that's so good. And then the other person I had to be like, you're not as good as him. And it was like, he needed the negative, he needed the positive. And it's just really interesting on how, like, even though they're super contrasting things, like they're both just moving towards a direction of getting better.
Yeah, no, I've used that one before. You can expand on that if you want to. I know I've got a point that I want to talk about, but like that, I've used that example because it's such a perfect example,
Right.
With other employees of like, this is a situation that Thomas had to go through, is you had to, you know, give someone positive reinforcement to get them going,
Right.
even though they were doing terrible.
Right.
And you had another.
Oh yeah, that's even a kind of a different situation. But yeah, like where that's a really tough one, right?
Mhm.
Because you start to get to a point where, you know, I think so. I had an employee that you know, we worked together at the hospital and we just did not see eye to eye, right? We didn't have a good starting spot. He was somebody who, like, when I had first taken over, we had both applied to be the manager of the department at the hospital. And I remember first and foremost, no, I'll get back to that. But it was like, as soon as I had gotten told that it was me that had gotten the position, that it wasn't him, he took me, and he found out. He took me into the office, and the first thing he said to me was like, I'll never respect you as my manager. I'll never think of you as my boss. Like, anything you say to me, like, I'm not going to listen. And I'm like, well, interesting start. Yeah. Nice. Like, interesting start out to this. And I was like, man, that's a pretty crazy thing. And to be honest, like, this was one of my lower moments too, because after that situation, like, I can be fully honest that like I had no good intentions for him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think people would blame me, but like my ego got in the way at that situation where I was like, screw you. Like, if that's how you're going to treat the very first situation of this, like, okay, man, well, obviously, like, you know, there's like really 2 kinds of employees: people who are going up or people who are going out, right? Like, it's a lot of times how it works. And so I kind of view this as like, okay, man, well, like, if that's if that's, first off, you wanted to be the manager, mind blowing. But like, second, if that's your attitude, I can't imagine that you're going to be around here much longer. Funny enough, he still works there. But it's a situation where I was very much like, I don't know, I would probably label it as almost a vendetta. Like, I had no interest in him progressing at all. And I saw him as an employee just start to deteriorate, right? Because it was one of those things where it's like, anytime I had an opportunity to yell at this guy, boy, did I take it, right? Because like, he just like, we were butting heads over everything, and he was undermining me. And it was just like, anything I was trying to do, like, when we talk about people rowing the boat in a different direction, boy, was he rowing the boat in a different direction. He was trying to purposefully, because he didn't respect me as his leader, because like, you know, he felt that he should have gotten the promotion over me, you know, to an extent. But I also didn't really show him anything either, especially once I became the manager. But this went on for literally 3 years, and no situation did he ever, you know, whether he should have or shouldn't have, he continued to work there, never lost his job, nothing ever happened bad enough. But I remember thinking one day that like, I can't get through to him. Like, no matter how much I yell at him, I can't get through to him. And it's like, you know, anytime he'd mess up again, boy, did I take advantage of those situations to really like lay it on him. And I think I finally realized like 2 different things. One, that like I was letting my ego get in the way of him progressing because I didn't care about him. I was upset with him. I had my own personal issues with him. And I was yelling at him to feel better. I wasn't yelling at him to make him any better. I was yelling so that when I left that meeting, I felt good. I felt better about it because I got my opportunity to yell at this guy who like was constantly undermining me and constantly doing these things that were really disrupting what I was trying to do. And I think I finally like took a step back of like, well, what is my actual goal here? If my actual goal here is to have him progress and be better, well, then I need to take a second and realize that. And even though I don't think he's doing the best job in the world, I know for a fact that me coming down on him negatively is never going to work. It's not something that he responds to. And so even though I didn't think that he was doing a very good job, I had to kind of take my ego back for a second and kind of project to him a more positive view of Thomas. And like, I had to come in there and I had to be like, I had to start praising him. Even though I didn't think he was exactly doing a good job, I had to start praising him on how he was doing. And lo and behold, you know, that over a couple of months, he started being a better employee. And it was like, we've talked about this and we've all talked about this, is like, at some point you have to take into account what your actual goal is. And if your actual goal is to get through to somebody and get them to a point where like they're going to be a better employee, like who cares how you go about it? Go about it the most effective way that's going to allow this person to actually progress.
That is one of the hardest things that I've had to learn. One of the hardest lessons that I've had to learn. And I didn't even necessarily learn it as a leader. And I'm glad I learned it before I got kind of put in that position. Mm-hmm. But it was my time with Chad and Vincent and I think I've talked about it before, but was realizing like what gets it, like what's the actual end goal here? Mm-hmm. Well, it's a successful business. What's the best way to get to that point? Well, arguing is definitely not.
Right. It feels good in the moment.
Oh yeah. It's naturally what you want to do,
sure.
But it's so hard to not just learn that lesson, but to be able to put it into practice as well. But I really like the comparison of, you know, this employee that obviously was getting worse and worse. And the only way to make them better was to give them praise. And that is extremely hard to do with something do that with someone that is getting continuously worse.
Right.
But I like the comparison of like, not every employee needs that though, because you had other employees that were doing really well, but if you gave them praise,
they'd be worse.
They would get worse. And
it makes no sense.
So you would have to, obviously you didn't want to come down and just say, hey, you know, you're doing a terrible job. But I think you use methods like, hey, so-and-so is doing better than you.
Yeah. And they'd be like, no, he's not. Yeah. And they'd be super employee. What if it's such a weird thing?
Dude, one of the things too is that I've had to kind of learn, especially recently, is as more and more of my responsibilities have been passed on to other people, is learning that the difference between someone doing something that not quite as good as I am and someone doing something just differently. It's a hard distinction to me, because you know, the way that I do things is the best possible way that I can envision to do them.
Right.
So someone doing something differently looks in my eyes like they're doing it worse a lot of times.
Yeah, sure. I can understand that.
And it's hard to realize that a lot of times they're actually doing it better. And so like, I know like with Ryan, that's been a really good example, because with marketing in general is quite a bit of artistic talent that goes into that, and different artists do different things, and doing things differently, even just slightly differently than I would do them, can, in my eyes, look like it's worse. But I mean, look at the content that Ryan has put out when you really take a step back. And I know that's one thing that I've had to kind of lean on, is like everybody else's feedback towards his work.
Yeah.
Of like, I know there's been times where he'll take a picture and I'm like, that's not how I would take it, but you're like, dang, that's a good picture. And I'm like, okay, cool. That gives me enough confidence that this is genuinely a good photo.
I want to give you kudos real quick, because I think that is probably one of the most difficult things that people don't ever realize, I think, in your position that they're going to go through. A couple of things that have been very interesting is like, and this is funny, right? Because, you obviously own Triad, you own Define Nutrition, is the point where you get outvoted for like how something tastes.
Yeah.
What? Like
Yeah.
you think like, oh, like so and so owns this, they just make all the flavor decisions or whatever, or you just like don't even think about the fact that it happens. And it's like, you know, not that we've ever had anything like too crazy, but it's like there have been situations where it's like, you know, it might be a 10-2 vote for a flavor of something and you're on the 2 side. But I think that you've taken it in stride really well, because that would be so difficult. Like this is like, you literally own this company and you're sitting there like, okay, we're doing something that I would have gone the other way, but everyone here is really excited about it. Everyone here is like, you're saying like with the artwork, it's like, you know, maybe it's not exactly how I would do it, but it's getting the response that we want. And it's like, okay, like not to, this isn't a call, but like you have done a good job of like taking your ego out of it and being like, okay, we have to do what's best for this. How do we progress the furthest, the fastest? And it's like, well, this is how we do it. We have to go for, you know, everyone, not just how I feel about something or you in that situation.
And I think that's again kind of keeping what's the long-term goal. It's
Right.
like, well, we want, simply put, we want to sell a lot of this product.
Right.
So for like Define stuff, when we're flavoring it, it's, you know, if we flavor it if we do my favorite flavor, we may not sell a lot if I'm being outvoted 10-2.
Right.
It's, man, I would, you know, as much as I want to have this flavor because I like it a lot, I would so much rather make sure that we're actually able to sell enough of it that we don't have expired inventory.
That's like you know, not that I don't think this would ever happen, because like we deal with like good things and we pick good stuff, but like imagine a world where like, and we might already, don't say if we do, but like where we have a product that you just don't like.
Ooh,
Like
we haven't done that yet.
what a crazy, like where you're just like, oh, I just genuinely don't like this.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure that would be hard to do because it's yours. So it's like having an ugly kid. Like you're still gonna love it, but like
You're gonna, yeah, no matter what,
you're gonna find the positives.
we make, yeah,
you're gonna find the
exactly,
positives.
yeah.
But like, man, what a crazy thing. Where if it was just like, or we got rid of something that was your favorite. Oh, like that would be tough, man.
Yeah.
Like don't get me wrong. Like if we got rid of something that was like my favorite, but nobody else liked it, then I was like, well, I kind of understand. But it's like, oh, what a tough thing though, man.
Dude, that was so I think there's still a balance to it. It's not simply just doing things that are going to serve the market the best. It's like, man, you know, to a certain extent, it's like we have to be unique.
Right.
And I have unique taste buds. I have unique preferences, you know, so mine does shine through with Define and for now, that's for sure. Probably I'd say over the next year, Preston's preferences are going to shine through more than mine.
1,000%. They really will.
Dude, we went through the amount of new products that we're going to release next year. There's some reformulations, but we're going to end up releasing, I think, like 6 or 7 new products.
You heard it here first, folks. Get excited.
But yeah, you know, making unique stuff, you know, to be able to make it unique, it has to at least fit me a little bit a lot of times, or at least fit somebody.
Yeah.
So it's one of those that like, so if you ever see anything that's like mango flavored, that's probably because of me, because I'm a big fan of mango.
Yeah. Right.
Like we make a mango protein. It's super unique, but I love mango, and I really liked when we did like 7 or 8 different protein flavor samples from our manufacturer, and I was a big fan of mango. Luckily, I had enough votes for mango as well.
Mango's very solid.
Yeah.
But that's like, oh, man, that's a, you know, like you said, though, at some point that might drift a little bit more towards Preston and his preferences of like what things look, especially formulas.
Dude, I had, this was a super interesting one. This was just last week with Preston, and I hope I'm not calling him out on anything, but it was just kind of a funny realization.
He'll cry. You're going to kill his excitement. Be careful.
Look at me. He already knows.
He's
but
fine. He's been dealing with me for almost 2 years and more, and he's fine.
So he asked me, because we were kind of going through new products and in some reformulations, and he said, do you ever think there'll be a time that we get rid of strawberry kiwi Define isolate? So we make 2 isolate protein flavors. Ryan is
just fell out of his chair.
But he said, do you ever think there'll be a time that we get rid of that flavor? And I said, well, why would we get rid of that? And he said, well, he's like, in store, man, he's like, mango just kills it, dude. Mango is such an awesome flavor. It does. He's like, I have a lot of people that really like it. And he's like, to be honest, he's like, I feel like I've had a lot of customers that aren't a huge fan of the strawberry kiwi. Like the strawberry shines through, but not the kiwi so much. And I haven't been a huge fan of it, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, you want to know an interesting fact, Preston? He's like, yeah, sure. I was like, we sell more strawberry kiwi than mango.
Boom. That is such a hard thing to like take your personal preferences out of recommendations.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such, because I mean, like I think Preston and I are good examples of like, we have pretty much in most cases polar opposite flavor preferences. Like even with the fine stuff, like he likes lemon drop, I like blue raspberry. Like he likes Define Way vanilla, I like Define Way chocolate. Like across the board, I think the only things that we really agree on are like hydrate and isolates. Like we have like similar favorites on those, but not the same favorites. But that is like such an interesting thing. Like, well, when you're like, oh, the mango's so good, and then there's strawberry kiwi, it's like, well, sure, no one's buying the strawberry kiwi.
Right. Yeah, if you're not hyping it up, if
you're not excited about it, no one's excited about
and
it.
that's a balance in itself too, though. It's like you have to, because again, you can't teach someone genuine excitement over a flavor. Like if it's like, if I simply don't like this flavor, like, yeah, I can talk about it and bring up all the positives. And, but at the same time, if I am a huge fan of this particular flavor of protein, I'm going to talk about it all the time. It's like, man, you want to let that run because it'll get other people excited about it too. They'll mix it up just right. They'll be excited when they're, letting you try it kind of deal. And you don't want to take that away. So Alyssa has to work on her side of things to make sure, hey, if certain flavors or certain products are taking off, like we're keeping tabs on, hey, if you're becoming a really big fan of something, let us know so we can bump thresholds, we can bump inventory and account for that, because we don't want to stifle it.
Funny how whenever I sample something that's my favorite, people seem to like that one the best.
Yeah.
Probably because I'm like, oh, there's this one and it's really good. And there's one that's really good. But this Cookies and Cream Core Pro is the greatest thing that has ever been made by a supplement factory, like a manufacturer. It is the greatest powder ever. And people are like, oh, and they try and they're like, and I'm like, isn't that amazing? And they're like, yes.
Plug on the Core Pro.
Oh, it's so
some
good.
of the best protein flavors we've got in the store. Actually, I say in the store ever, honestly.
World.
Yeah.
The universe. I don't know what other, but it's so good. Oh my God. Like people are like, I think it's funny because we've had a number of people think that we own Core because of how excited about Core Pro we are. And it's like, I wish, but no.
That's one of my favorite questions of like, oh yeah, you guys just recommend. I've had someone legitimately like, oh yeah, I mean like I like the Core stuff, but like I know you guys just recommend it because it's your brand. I was like, oh, it is not. And it was just like, oh, well, like I'm sure that's like some sort of deal or something. It's like, no, we actually have our own house brand and it's this over here.
That one over there.
Yeah, we just don't make anything in this category.
Right. And it's like, yeah, and this one's just genuinely very good. Like I can't, like, okay, just because I like Define Pre doesn't mean I don't like Core Fury or something else. It's like there's lots of options. That's the whole point.
Right.
I think getting back to, kind of taking our ego out of it, especially when it comes to coaching, I think one of the interesting things that I think, and I don't think we brought it up on here, I think we just talked about it in person, but one of the interesting things is I feel like so many places, the way that they view managers like dealing with people is like, oh, you can't deal with, like, you can't fix this situation. And I think they take out of account like things just becoming inefficient, like I think that there is like maybe, and I don't think we have this situation here, but like genuinely like in the situation at the hospital, like my director and myself as the assistant director, both officed in the same area. When it came to this certain employee, what we really should have done from probably pretty early was let Eric handle more of those kind of things, right? Because not that I couldn't do it, but it was super inefficient for me to do it. And again, if our real goal in the end is to have him be the best as fast as possible, me yelling at him's not working. Eric, my director, talking to him worked a lot better. And so I think or not we, but I think a lot of places view that as like failure. And I think we've done a really good job of not looking at it that way, of looking at like, wait, what's the most efficient route? And obviously you have to have respect for like certain people, but what's the most efficient route to go down with this? Like when I were to talk to Robbie, especially in my yelling years of talking to Robbie, I would come into that situation in order to try to get my point across. I felt like at the time, obviously that was wrong, but I felt like at the time that I had to come into it at like a 9 or like a 10. And Eric could have gotten that same message across at a 2. Right?
Yeah.
And I think like, you know, I don't feel like we've had situations, but like there have been situations where it's like, hey, you know, we're going to have a talk with this person. It's best, or a coaching from somebody, like this person needs to be coached. Okay, cool. Let's all take our egos out of this for a second. And like, let's look at this as like who and what environment is going to allow this person to get the most out of this. Right. Yeah. And it's like, cool. That means adding this person. That means subtracting this person, or whatever that looks like. Like, who cares what that looks like? The point of it is to make it be efficient as possible. If somebody has like, you know, if somebody's been working together, you know, not that Preston, we'll just pretend Preston and I, like, let's say Preston and I, because we've been working together for so long, we like don't always have the best relationship because it's just been a long time of working together. We haven't always seen eye to eye. And that's not the situation at all. Preston and I get along great. But if that was the situation, well, at some point, me just hammering the same nail over and over again, trying to drive my point in, like, isn't working. Maybe I can change up how I do it, but maybe we need a quicker solution than that. Maybe the solution that makes more sense is Anthony, right? Yeah. Maybe it's Anthony having a talk with him, or maybe it's you having a talk with him, or maybe you and Anthony having a talk with him, where my point to get it across has to be at an 8. For you guys, it can come in at a 1.
Right.
And for somebody, you know, like again, in this fake scenario, Preston, is what is he going to respond better to? A 1 that carries a lot of weight, or a 9 that doesn't carry much? Right. And it's like when I'm just like trying to hammer the same thing in, and I'm frustrated, and maybe I have my own points where I'm like been frustrated with him. So I'm using this to myself as like even subconsciously as a way to like let him have it a little bit, or like kind of get something off of my chest because of my ego. Well, then it's like, or you guys can come into it, or Anthony can come into it, and Anthony who's like, hey, I don't have that same feeling towards Preston because I you know, like we're fine. And then Anthony can come in and be like, hey bro, like in Anthony style, like, hey bro, like why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Right? Where I'm going to be like, bro, what the hell is going on? Like we can't do this because of this. And I'm like having to get all worked up. And it's like, you know, because for me coming into it as a 1 with him, he's just going to brush it off as nothing. So I have to come into it at an 8, where it's like you and Anthony come in, especially you have a lot of power in this situation where you can just like, literally you can just sit in a room and it's like the weight is just that much more, right? Where it's like, hey, we can come into this as a 1. You might have to say 2 words, but because of who you are in the position that you're in, you carry so much more weight than somebody else does. And I really appreciate the fact that, like, even in our small experiences of having to do that, we've never looked at, you know, obviously anyone in leadership as not being able to handle a situation and that being like them as a failure. We've looked at it as like, oh, it's just inefficient. Let's find a more efficient way to do it. Yeah. And it's like when we started doing that, that's when things really have like made changes and have gotten better.
Yeah. That's you bring up kind of an interesting point, and we have used that in the past more than once, of, you know, being able to involve me because it makes the situation more serious in the first place. And, you know, I can even sit there and not even say much at all.
Right.
I'm just involved, and it brings a lot of seriousness to it. But it's one thing that I have learned that I continuously have to be more and more conscious of, because when I do come in you know, like we talked about earlier, when I do come in as a 1 or 2 and, you know, tell someone, you know, that they're doing something wrong, or, you know, to change something, or just say, you know, a lot of things, it's taken sometimes too seriously.
Right.
So,
and imagine you coming in at a 7.
Yeah. I don't anymore at all. So
it's too much.
Yeah.
Right. Like, but it's like, again, man, I think the important thing here is like, I think in so many places that I've seen from like either the inside or the outside, it's like, oh, this manager's, not getting through to this person. Let's get rid of the manager. Or like, oh, this person's doing this. Like, let's get rid of the manager. And it's like, well, man, maybe their relationship's stressed from who knows what, like just being together a lot. Like that can happen.
Yeah.
And relationships go in ebbs and flows. Right. And so what if it's, okay, well, who do they look up to? Well, maybe that message coming from that person at a 1 from somebody who they respect and look up to, maybe that does 10 times the good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, but it takes the first manager being like, okay, I'm going to take my ego out of it and be okay with it and not consider myself a failure, and you not calling them a failure, any leadership person like calling them a failure. It's just like, it's not your inability to coach someone. Sometimes after a while or in certain situations, it is just inefficient. And it's like, what are we doing if not trying to create the most efficient environment for the employees that work at Triad or whatever company you're at? Why are we not trying to? I think it's kind of an archaic, like old school mindset of just like, nope, just beat it into them, just beat that message into them, and they're either going to get it or they don't. And it's like, well, now what is your real goal with that employee? To make them better or to what?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good point. And it's definitely come like full circle. Like, when you talked about like managers being looked at as inefficient, and I think it's helped to have the perspective that we do of being close and like, even getting to the point where, we watched you and Anthony step into these manager positions and us all knowing all of the employees, knowing that sometimes, it's better if Anthony handles some of your employees, and
1,000%.
it's better if sometimes you handle it. And it's not an inability of either of you guys.
Right.
It's the relationship.
It's an inefficiency.
It's an inefficiency. And that's one of the best things I think we've taken or we've gotten from having manager meeting recently is our ability to take it away of being a personal situation.
Take our ego out of it.
And look at ourselves as a team is how do we handle each situation to the best of our ability as a team, not as individuals. And I'm sure that like gets harder when you're not around those situations with watching, the manager and employee relationships. It's easy to point and say, hey, that manager is just being inefficient or is being ineffective and replace them. But I'm sure that gets harder and harder as you grow to remember that it's like, hey, it's not this manager's fault necessarily. And we need to have, systems in place as we move forward of managers coming together and working as a team with all of their employees as opposed to all completely separate.
1,000%. I feel like that's one of the strongest things that we've done is like whenever, like it's very rare. Like we have, everyone at Triad is phenomenal. Like let's just say that. But when we go to a meeting and it's like, the very few times that it's happened, but it's hey, we need to talk to this person, right? Whether that's Anthony and myself, Preston and myself, all of us, me and you and Anthony, like whatever the combination, whether a lot of times it's all of us, is we go, okay, cool. Who's this coming best from? And like, what a mindset. Like that is such a cool thing to me because I feel like nobody does it like that. It goes, well, you deal with it. And it's like, instead of it being like you deal with it, it is, okay, where us as a whole, let's sit here and decide who this message is going to come from the best. And if we do that, where I think this truly sparks from, and I think that, not to pat ourselves on the back too hard, it comes from a genuine care of the employees. I feel like when the leadership looks at a manager and just says like, why aren't you dealing with this? Like deal with it, and not asking like, well, why do we feel like this isn't effective? Like, what have we tried this? Have we tried that? Maybe sometimes it's just falling on deaf ears. And it's like, that doesn't necessarily mean we need to get rid of the manager or the employee. It's like, no, like let's all take a step back, and maybe this coming from a different angle, maybe a different person or whatever. But I feel like with our mindset, what we're constantly looking at and what we're constantly trying to do is like, hey, how do we get this employee the most benefit? How do we benefit them the most? And it's like, I feel like having that employee first mindset instead of just like beat it into them till they quit. And it's like, well, then they weren't tough enough to make it anyway, or whatever your excuse is at that point. It's like, no, maybe coming at it from this angle here with this person is actually going to empower the employee the most. And now the employee has the opportunity to be successful. And that's what we truly want. I look at every single employee that works at Triad and I hope the most success for them. And I think we all do, obviously. But like when we sit there and do that, that's where that's coming from. Is it's like, cool, we want employee X, whoever. So I made it Michael, new employee Michael. It's like, we want the best for Michael. We want him to progress the furthest. Well, for him to do that, it's got to come from this direction. And then here's the thing. When people start feeling better and they're doing better, their morale's higher. Guess what? Their relationships with the people around them get better. And then whenever I'm trying to, maybe I had to have Anthony coach Michael. And because Michael and I's relationship's a little strained from working together all the time. Well, then we get into a situation where like now he's doing better. He's feeling better. His morale's higher. Now when I come to him and I don't butt heads so much. Him and I have a more efficient relationship, and it goes round and round and round.
You've used up your leadership currency. So now, someone else that has like, $1 million worth of leadership currency because they've never had to use any of it.
Right. Because they don't manage them on a daily basis.
Because they don't manage them on a daily basis. And they see them working hard. And they see them as a leader, as everybody else looking at them as a leader.
Right.
Hey, spend, half of that
right.
in a very, very simple way, coaching this person. And then I can start to build up mine again.
Well, and it's one of those words like I feel like a grass is greener. Like I feel like so often people look at the other managers, like, and I'm not saying here, but like if you've got two locations, like these employees might look at this manager and these employees might look at this manager because they don't deal with them on a daily basis, see their own faults, or see they don't have to get coached by them. They haven't been told, they weren't doing something right by X manager. Maybe the grass is greener kind of situation. They start viewing that other manager as like, oh, well, if I just had that. Well, now that message coming from there, coming across as it coming from straight up from yours, is it's like, man, that can carry a lot of weight. And I feel like that's such an underutilized efficiency that businesses and places can use, but they just don't think of it because they're just like, nope, this is yours, your responsibility. Why didn't you fix it? You're a failure. Get out of here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you lose the employee and the manager. And what did you gain?
Yeah. When neither of them were really doing anything wrong.
Right, because you didn't empower either of them to be successful.
Right.
You literally limited both of their success by not having an open mind to at least involving someone else. You're like, okay, cool. I have literally nothing to offer either of you besides just keep digging the hole that you're digging, that you're both just going to, it's just going to be the place where you both leave. And so what's the point in that? Like, if my real goal and your real goal and Triads or whoever, whatever, if your real goal is the empowerment of your employees and your managers, sometimes it's getting creative. Sometimes it's using somebody else who, like you said, has that leadership currency because they don't have to spend it on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you're with an employee like, luckily Preston and I never had to really deal with this, but like Preston and I were in the trenches together for a long time in Norman. We had to be friends. If we weren't friends, it was not going to work. And sometimes being friends over being his boss or being his manager, like hopefully Preston can attest to this, that I've always tried to treat him like an equal. Well, here's the problem that comes with treating someone like an equal all the time. And again, I'm saying Preston and I never had any problems, but like if I'm constantly treating employee as an equal and not as their boss or whatever, at some point we might butt heads because we have always just acted the same. Mm-hmm. And so now if I introduce Anthony into this situation, who's never had to play on that playing field in that sense, well, Anthony's got all the leadership currency in the world for Preston because he's never had to spend it. He's never had to do anything. And now it's like, cool, hey, cash some of that in. And I think we're going to get really far with Preston and then look at what can happen. And then the relationship between Preston and I start getting really good. And then things just start to progress. You're empowering both as opposed to limiting both by just having like someone else and not, first off, the manager, one, not taking that as an ego shot and like understanding that it's just the best. And two, it's just having like a hopeful outlook for all of your employees and like trying to empower them to be the best. And again, Preston, I love you. We don't have any problems at all.
All right. New idea.
No one manages anybody.
No,
Everyone manages everybody.
Everyone, no. Yeah, the quote unquote manager of that store doesn't manage those people, manage someone the other store. And, so we have 3. So Norman manages Quail, Quail manager manages Yukon, Yukon manager manages Norman people.
Oh, jeez.
But it's secret. I gave away the secret. Ryan, we're going to have to cut this out.
Bleep it out. This is a genius idea. But man, I think there's it's just a funny thing to me because how many times in this industry or others have you seen places like retail locations or whatever that have multiple locations? How many times have you seen them cycle through managers for not getting the job done?
Some so quickly,
super fast.
Some within weeks,
right?
And that's wild to me.
Yep.
That people that we're having step into manager positions have been with us for 3+ years typically.
Yeah.
Preston did it very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But he was still almost 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. He was right on the cusp of 2 years. And it's but I don't know, man. That's the thing though, especially in a Preston situation, right? So now you have a new manager who is essentially equals to most of his employees there. And Preston does a good job of treating people like equals as well. But it's now Preston has stepped into a leadership role with people who he's just been friends with and he's worked with day after day after day after day after day. It's not like our managers don't take customers, right? Our managers have just as many interactions as anybody else. It's all part of it. You're all a group. When you're there together, he might be quarterbacking it, but you're all on a team, right? And so a perfect example is him. Maybe he hasn't built a leadership currency yet. Or let's take Preston out of the equation, just a new manager in general. Maybe he hasn't earned the leadership currency yet because he's the new manager, right? So that's another situation where it's hey, man, how about, let's say, Preston's having a problem with a new employee that we hire. And, Preston's only been manager for a couple weeks. He's trying to figure out how to be manager or whatever. Maybe it's Anthony coming in and leading a talk with somebody with him. Or, sitting in on it. Maybe that carries the extra weight like you carry sometimes, is maybe having Anthony and the weight that he carries come and sit in there and allows Preston to learn. Or maybe it's one of those situations where it's hey, it's just better if I step back. And it's man, again, it's just why don't more this is a genuine question. Why don't more places look at this as how to be efficient as possible? How do we fix this problem as fast as possible? And who cares about our egos? Who cares about, and I guess I fell victim to this too. I was yelling at Robbie. I just named him. I said his name. Whatever. Sorry, Robbie.
You said it. You said it a couple of times before that.
Did I?
You got red in your eyes. And
I probably did. Sorry, but it's one of those things where it's to be honest, if I'm fully honest with myself, most of those talks were not for him. They were for me.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. Yeah, I think that's the distinction that I had to make was figuring out the difference between what's going to make me feel better now and what's going to achieve the result that I actually want.
Bingo.
Yeah. One thing that I am kind of curious on before I get into this, you want any more of this? We getting close to 2 hours here?
Yeah. We are getting close to 2 hours. I'm going to hold off.
We'll do a little. I picked it up already. We'll do a little.
All right. Do me a scooch.
Just a little scooch. But one thing that I've been really curious on is how other companies, because it seems like it's such the standard, such the norm for companies to hire outside management. So I'm sure most people know what I mean by that, but to, have a full company full of employees and they need a manager. So they, put out job listings and bring on someone with management experience. Management experience, I know, is super beneficial, but I just feel like if we did that, maybe other companies are in a different situation, but if we did that and we brought on, someone with quote unquote manager experience, they're going to bring, some to the table. But if we put someone in a manager position with all the employees that we have currently, and it's bro, I'm having to teach you how to restock.
Yeah.
Dude, you're taking customers and you're butchering it. It's those things that especially with customers and interactions, it's like it takes like a good year a lot of times for people to really get in that rhythm, that I just feel like it would be so hard for that person to gain respect as a manager. That how do they get away with bringing on management like that?
I have no idea. Think of it from the other side too. So I was talking to a buddy of mine at a CrossFit event that I was at the other day, and the position that he was in, he had started the job, got trained, was 2 weeks out of training. The person who was training him quits, right?
Ooh.
He's making, and he gave me some numbers, but he's making like the difference between the person that was training him and him was about $40,000 a year. So they were making about $40,000 more than he was, right? They quit. The leadership of this place goes, oh, well, you know how to do this the best, so we're going to give you their workload. The person who just trained you, you're getting their workload, no pay raise.
Wow.
Then they bring in an outside person and have him train them on how to do that job and take over those clients again. So he got trained by the manager, then was the acting manager, then trained the new manager, all while making $40,000 less than the manager.
Goodness.
Could you imagine?
Wait, so the guy that had been on for 2 weeks was doing the training?
Yep. He trained his boss.
Oh.
Which would what?
Wait,
would
he trained his boss?
yeah. So it's like his manager. He was the subordinate, right?
Yeah.
So my buddy's the subordinate. He's getting trained how to do this job, right? Manager quits. So him as the subordinate just gets the manager workload, no title, no pay increase, nothing. Then they bring in an external hire as the manager, and then he, as the acting manager, has to train this new person, and then goes, okay, now you're my boss.
You graduated training. Congrats.
You're my boss.
You're my boss.
Yeah. Well, that would,
Goodness.
but that would be what happens.
I
right?
just can't imagine how that works.
If we hired an outside manager for Norman, Preston would have had to have trained them.
Yeah. And imagine
Preston.
Norman.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's goodness. And that's, I mean, and we've talked about it before, and we're scratching Preston's back quite a bit in this.
Boy, Preston.
But he was the most equipped person to run Norman. Like, no amount of leadership training could have prepared someone better than Preston to run that store, because he knows the day-to-day. He knows, and we went through things, not, we didn't just take him through, obviously what it takes to run a store, but how to be a leader there. And like, not just like be a leader in general, but be a leader there.
Yep.
It's like no one else would be more prepared for that position.
No, I remember you asking me when, because I had given my vow of confidence for Preston, but it was like, you were like, is he ready? And I said, he has learned everything that he can learn in his position. The only way for him to progress from this point is for us to give him a new challenge.
I told him that.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, we could not have you more ready.
Yep. That's
like,
it.
Yep.
Like he has to, like, it's part of like, he's got to jump out of the fire that he's in, that he's learned to extinguish, and jump into a new one.
Right.
And it's like, but that's like, there's nothing, I can't do anything to prepare you for this besides guiding you through the fire that you're about to be in.
So that's, I mean, that's really similar to, when just employees get done with training is, we go through, the test, all the ingredients, and go through, all the random things that they have to do, but it's obviously very customer oriented and learning how to take customers. And we go through interaction, or we do, what's the word? What do we call it? Like hypothetical interactions.
We do
Hypotheticals.
Hypotheticals.
That's not what we call them.
That's what Anthony's always called them.
Oh,
Well,
weirdo.
anyway, I think most people know what I'm talking about. Is we go through as much as we possibly can, but you get to the point where it's like you are not going to be perfect in where we need you to be, but there's nothing else that we can teach you without you just going out there and doing it.
Yep. And
I have a serious problem. I can't listen to new employees. I like.
Yeah.
You just.
No, I understand.
It just like I've done it. I've done it somewhat successfully, especially when it was me that was doing all the training with everybody. But I've just
playing.
Role playing. Yeah. I feel like we call it scenarios.
Yeah, there it is.
There it is.
That feels better.
Yeah. So
Hypotheticals.
hopefully Anthony's listening to that and changes. But yeah, we get to the point where you just got to go up there and fuck up a couple interactions.
For real.
We try and avoid it as much as possible, but you just got to go out there and screw it up, and we got to listen, and we got to give you corrections, and you got to get better. And that's why we talk about, it takes a lot of times around a year. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do it faster than 6 months, but typically around a year is when you really start to hit your stride of like, okay, you're doing well.
You're comfortable.
You're comfortable, and you have all the tools, and you can take like any type of customer, or like 99.9% of customers.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, kind of an interesting parallel. There was a jiu-jitsu tournament this weekend, and I've competed a little, not a ton by any stretch of the imagination. There's some people who compete all the time, but we had a girl from our gym competing for the first time. She's a 1-stripe blue belt. She's been training for a while. I mean, if she's not 2 years in, she's close to being 2 years in, and she knows her jiu-jitsu. Like she's there's still a lot to learn. Anybody who's a blue belt does, but like myself included. But like there's a lot compared to like a novice or somebody who's just first starting out.
2 years is a lot of experience.
2 years is a lot of experience. And she competed for the first time this weekend. Mm-hmm. And just like going through scenarios versus taking a customer by yourself, it is a whole different ball game. It is something completely different. I'm sure Ryan can attest to this too, of like actually getting, like, you can ride a bike all you want for 2 years. Getting out and,
racing,
with
other people,
getting out and rubbing shoulders is something different.
I'm about to say a big thing you see right now, especially in racing, is, cycling itself saw a big uptick during COVID. So many people were on their indoor trainers during COVID. And so you have all these people who just got tons of fitness all of a sudden, but have no race experience.
Yep.
And so it makes races super sketchy, and therefore the people who know what they're doing and everything, it's like you have to pay attention for so much more now, just because you have no clue what's coming at you.
That makes sense.
So many people have so much fitness, have not as much knowledge as they probably should or need
to
be able to compete at that level, but they have the fitness to be there. And so
that's a tough thing.
They're keeping up with you, but they're also going to potentially run you off the road.
Right. Well, that's the thing. And that's the thing that happened at the jiu-jitsu tournament this week. She did well, but she didn't do as well as she thought she was going to do. And she didn't do as well as she'd hoped, but she still medaled in both of her in 2 different divisions, which is really good. But she's like, it's so different. And I'm like, yep, there's nothing. And she's got another tournament coming up. She's actually doing roll in the cage, which is that's the thing that you came to for me.
That was really cool.
Yeah. It's a bigger deal, right? Mm-hmm. It's a big one. And so I was like, you should be so happy that like you gained this experience prior, because like it's once you get thrown out there into the like she does jiu-jitsu. I see her at jiu-jitsu 3-4 times a week.
Wow. Yeah.
So she's there a lot, and it's like she trains in her hard classes. She trains against men. Like she does everything she's supposed to do, like everything she can do, not supposed to do, everything she can do in order to prepare herself for like intense like rounds. And she got out there, and it was like, and she did well, but then there was times where like, her whole game fell apart. And it's like, there's something about real reps. There's something about real action that makes it a very different thing.
Yeah. Yeah. We're competing to win now, not just to train and learn.
Right.
People watching.
Yep.
Yeah.
You can mess this up and it matters. And that's where I think, and so same thing with that. And, and then we have these people who like, we've got a couple of, I say kids, but they're 16 years old, but they compete 40, 50 times a year, if not more. Oh yeah. Wow. There's a whole trend of, this is a really interesting thing. There's a whole trend of the new generation of jiu-jitsu kids that are exceptionally good. And so what's happened is their parents and themselves have realized that there's like a legitimate monetary future in jiu-jitsu and just fighting in general with UFC and stuff like that. And they homeschool the kids, and they train 2 to 3 times a day, 7 days a week. And it's like, these kids are monsters.
So they're competing like almost every weekend.
Yeah, more. Usually sometimes like multiple times. Like we've got a kid right now who is he's 16 years old, but like he just did, so the biggest jiu-jitsu tournament you could argue in the world is like 80cc, and as like a 16-year-old was like tapping 30-year-old black belts like madness.
Wow.
And so it's like, you know, it takes 12 years to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and it's like he'll have his black belt by the time he's 21.
Jeez.
Like 21, 22, he'll have a black belt, but he has he's already been training that long. In jiu-jitsu, you have to be a certain age to start getting certain belts. And it's like he might even be that old, honestly, but before he gets his black belt. But it's like he has the mat time of a normal black belt now. It's like he is a black belt. His just belt's a different color. And it's like he's got the time, he's got the experience, he got everything. He's just not old enough. And he's probably got more experience and more competitions and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like this kid competes on national stages constantly. He's won like there's like 3 other big tournaments. There's like Worlds, Pans, and like Euros. And it's like he's like a 3-time Pans gold medalist. Like, dude's crazy.
Yeah.
But the point is like that I'm getting at is he's got the competition reps. When he walks into a competition, he's like, well, I don't care. Like, whatever. I'll be competing in 3 days. If this doesn't go well, it's not that big of a deal. And he
doesn't have the jitters.
He's calm. It's the same thing with us. It's why you talk about it taking about a year. It's like after a year of taking interactions and customers, you're pretty set on like, most things that walk through the door aren't going to scare me. I'm going to be able to handle most of these situations. And it's the same thing that, you know, Jet, this kid does is like, he's so used to competition. He's so used to getting out there and getting thrown things that he has no idea. He's like, what are you going to do that I haven't seen?
Yeah.
You know, and that's, I think, the situation that we see with people after like a year, and then even more as they continue to progress. But after a year, you've been through, you know, you've had a disgruntled customer, you've had, you know, you've dealt with most situations, right? And it's like, okay, well, now you have your reps, you have your competition reps, like you're ready to go.
Right. You can't expect someone to win golds at Pans, you know, on their first competition, no matter how much training they go through.
Right. Because it's different.
Right.
It's different.
Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
dang, man. I think, Ryan, what are we at time-wise?
I think we're coming up on 2 hours, if not just over.
Nice. That's pretty good.
good timing.
Yeah.
I've been dealing with some serious allergies over the last week. We were outside again at the family property, and I feel like I'm starting to sound more and more nasally.
You should have got some local honey. Apparently that helps.
I think that's something you have to take like regularly, though. Like the whole idea behind that, because I've heard that before, is that you're getting pollen, like the bees collect pollen, and you know that transfers to the honey, and it helps build up like an immunity as opposed to immediately. I could be wrong, but
I'm sure.
yeah.
You're not in Missouri right now, so
No,
I don't
that's
think
true.
it's gonna help.
I think that was a big part of it, though, is I wasn't accustomed to.
That's a crazy thing.
allergens.
I know we're gonna get started on something else here, but like that's a crazy thing where we had a customer, a good friend of ours. She went for training to like Kansas, and never been to Kansas before. Never really had like allergies at all, and like some tree or bush or plant or something she is severely allergic to, and like started like having like anaphylactic shock, like big time. And she's like never dealt with it before, and it's just this plant in Kansas. Like she's like, she's okay, like everything's fine, but like it almost got her. And it's like you just have no idea. Like, what a crazy thing. She's like, I've never dealt with allergies ever. And it just was like, oh, out here in this field training, it was like,
it'll hit you in the face too. And where if she would have grown up with that, she, you know, might deal with allergies, but a lot more mild.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because you're accustomed to it. Yeah.
Crazy. I'm
sure that's what it was, but I'm kind of dealing with like the aftershock of that. Yeah. Sound a little nasally.
Weak bloodline. Well, thanks, guys. It's been episode 4. It's been episode 4. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Oi.